Harsh words from President Erdogan after German authorities cancelled rallies that aimed to drum up support among Turks living there for a key referendum back home. Was it politically motivated? And how will this latest war of words play on already strained ties between Turkey and the European Union? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Sika. A referendum vote that could increase the powers of Turkey's president is threatening to cause a diplomatic row with Germany. That's after Recep Tayyip Erdogan hit out at authorities there for blocking several rallies supporting him. He accused them of carrying out what he called Nazi practices. Around 1.4 million Turkish citizens in Germany can vote in the April referendum. The decision to cancel the events was due to security concerns in Germany, but it's led to a war of words, and it comes after Turkey's arrest of Deniz Yücel, a Turkish-German journalist working for Die Welt. He's been charged with spreading terrorist propaganda and inciting hatred. Will the tough talk further strain relations between these two NATO allies?
Arkadaşlarım bazıları
Some of the friends have been talking about fascism. Now I will talk about it. Look, I thought Nazism had ended in Germany. Turns out that it's still going on, plain and visible. If you believe in democracy, my minister will meet yours. He will hold a town hall meeting. Why are you getting upset?
Well, let's take a look at why Turkey is holding the referendum. The proposed ban would turn the country from a parliamentary to a presidential republic. The role of prime minister would be scrapped. The new post of vice president would be created, and the president would be given new powers to appoint ministers, choose the majority of senior judges, and enact certain laws by decree. The ruling AK Party argues the reforms are needed for stability and ensuring government decision-making is swift. Well, let's bring in our guests now. Joining us from Ankara is Metin Atmaca. He is a political analyst and professor with Ankara University. In Berlin, we have Raphael Bossong. He is a research associate with the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. And finally, Christian Brackel. He is the country director for the German think tank Heinrich Böll Foundation. He joins us from Istanbul. Good to have you all with us, gentlemen. So, Raphael Bossong, let me start with you. Anytime somebody makes a comparison with Nazi Germany, that's not likely to go down well in Berlin. But as far as the Turkish president's larger concerns about this rally, what is the source of this complaint?
Well, obviously, as you kind of said in the introduction, there has been a series of cancellations of events where sort of Turkish ministers, most notably the economy minister, have been barred and they have had to cancel and relocate. And in that sense, there was a suspicion or the perception by the Turkish government that this was a deliberate decision by the German government. However, the German authorities have been clear this have been local decisions by local authorities based on health and safety consideration, also based on the fact that some of these events were allegedly for other purposes than the appearance of a minister and a political rally. And so that's where we are at the moment. And tonight, if I'm correctly informed, the Turkish foreign minister is still bound to speak in Hamburg, and we'll see whether this goes ahead.
Well, what's the root of these security concerns about this rally? Because the people in Turkey are saying that this is an infringement on the free speech of Turkish citizens in Germany.
I'm not a local from Gaggenau, where this first happened in the south of Germany, but I think it's not entirely implausible to say that events that were registered as relatively small are actually considerably more sort of in size, but also politically heated. I mean, don't forget that there have been lots of demonstrations on both sides around this referendum, and there are also kind of Turkish and Kurdish sort of elements in German society who are very critical. So I can understand from the local perspective that there are concerns that these things are a lot more controversial and demanding police presence than seemed in the initial stage when these kind of events were registered. And at least in the case of one sort of speech, there was at least what we could see from the authorities, it was sort of registered as the kind of foundation of a new organization. So it seemed like a local German event. But then only later the authorities learned that the Turkish minister would apparently appear. So I can see that from the outside it might seem like a central directed sort of decision, but actually from the German division of powers it's not. And I think we have no indication to suggest that the federal German government had a hand in this at this stage.
Christian Brachel, what do you make of the Turkish president's comments, particularly in light of the already strained relations between Turkey and Germany?
I think this remark, as many others that we've heard in the past days, is 100% election campaigning for the upcoming referendum. We know from the past that the AKP government needs internal and external real and perceived enemies that they can then present to the constituencies as the ones wanting to attack Turkey, wanting to or wishing all the worst for Turkey and its citizens. But general, I mean, it's just not true. I mean, you can discuss about if it's a fair diplomatic move to ban ministers from speaking in Germany, but for sure it's not a matter of freedom of speech, because I mean Turkish ministers are not German citizens. I mean, those who live in Germany, including those with Turkish roots, should have full rights to campaign for whatever opinion they want. Even if it's for a yes for a referendum that seeks to undermine democracy and human rights in the country. But that is okay, but that is, I think, a different thing if a Turkish minister who is not a German citizen comes into Germany and campaigns for it, even though I think I would still let it go ahead. I think it's not worth the diplomatic trouble.
And this, of course, Christian Brachel, comes after the arrest of the Turkish-German journalist who worked for the German newspaper Die Welt. I mean, what do you make of that the fact that this is coming after this arrest last month?
The arrest has already strained German-Turkish relations and brought it to a new nadir. I mean, we have seen these crises being triggered time and again in the German-Turkish relationship, at least till last year. I mean, when the German parliament voted on a referendum on the Armenian genocide. And there were other smaller hiccups on the road. But I think the arrest of Deniz Yücel is probably the highest that the emotions of the German public have been involved in this discussion about the relationship with Turkey. You mentioned briefly that he was arrested on charges of inciting terrorism or for propaganda for terrorist groups. The important thing to know is that Mr. Yücel by himself went to a police station because he wanted to have a fair trial and the trial to go ahead. And so he didn't want to flee, or he didn't want to undermine justice. He was just afraid that he might not get a fair trial, and what he got in return is that the Turkish authorities put him in pre-trial detention, which, as we all know in this country, can last up to 5 years, for some people even longer. And there is no guarantee that there might be a trial or even a verdict afterwards.
Metin Atmaca, if this is about President Erdogan trying to whip up support among his base, among his core supporters, is it really constructive for him to be criticizing the authorities in Germany by comparing them to their Nazi past?
There is less than 1.5 months for the referendum, so definitely the one motivation is political in terms of having more support from the more conservative-leaning voters in Europe, especially in Germany, as you said. So we shouldn't just limit with the 1.4 million Turkish voters in Germany, but all around Europe there is more than 3 million people who will be voting. That's one part. But on the other hand, probably I mean, I'm seeing from the other perspective, from Germany's perspective as well, there is a political game going from that side as well. I mean, in the end of the year, in September, there is the national elections in Germany, and there is a rise of the nationalists in all European countries, even if it's not all, but most of European countries are having more and more nationalist leanings because of the immigration issue, especially focusing on the Muslims and Syrian refugees. So Germany is also basically trying to use a stronger hands-on political side of its own part. When we look at from this perspective, in fact, both sides are kind of like winners in these words of wars. In the end, I'm not sure if it will continue after a referendum in Turkey. Probably it will end up these war of words, because we have come across such moments in the last 5 years several times. I mean, this is not the first time. Even last year, you know, Erdogan was threatening of opening the doors for the Syrian refugees going to Europe. So, but still they are abiding with the rules of law between both countries. So definitely there is the political motivation behind it.
All right, we're going to broaden this out a little bit now and talk about the row between Germany and Turkey having the potential for far-reaching effects, because Turkey has for years been pushing to join the European Union, and Germany is a key member. Now, official talks for Turkey to join the EU began in 2005. After years of slow-moving negotiations at the beginning of last year, it seemed there was hope for progress. In March, the European Union and Turkey reached a deal to try and stop the influx of refugees, particularly from Syria into Europe, in exchange for economic aid and a promise to grant visa-free travel to Turkish citizens into the region. But 4 months later, after a failed coup in Turkey, the European Parliament urged governments to freeze EU membership talks. The Turkish government had fired thousands of civil servants, arrested soldiers, police officers and academics, as well as shut down media outlets. All of them were accused of having links with those who planned the failed takeover. So, Raphael Bossong, if I could turn back to you on this. This is a real concern, not just in Germany, but throughout the European Union, is what the Turkish government has been doing since that attempted coup, and the perception that the country is becoming more and more authoritarian. What do you say to that?
Well, obviously, I mean, you've said all the key developments that have been happening, and it's clear that the referendum that's coming up would be, in a way, the last step towards a very different kind of system and sort of sealing this kind of divergence of views on how sort of society and freedoms are organized. So the debate is not new. The question is, how long can we maintain this kind of tension and hope for some quiet and functional cooperation behind the scenes, or once certain political sort of events have faded, like, you know, the previous speaker was saying. I think in this case we're really at a point where it looks like it's maybe not possible anymore to hope for this kind of calming. And if Erdogan wins with this referendum, I think it's almost inevitable. I mean, we'll see, but it's almost inevitable that this kind of freezing will take place and that further damage is done to the European relationship to Turkey. I'm not saying it's not possible to cooperate further in the future, but it will have to be on a different basis, on a different understanding. And I think both sides are currently already very much evaluating what is the remaining common ground for future collaboration on different issues, ranging from migration to hard security to economic and customs affairs. As a final point, I think the remaining interest of the West is, of course, yes, migration and security, but also in a wider sense avoid if I may rely to a kind of a letter the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, was writing some time ago. I mean, the new threat of, you know, being circled by populists, on the one hand Trump, of course, then Putin and Erdogan. So Europe obviously doesn't want to be now without friends on its borders, but at the same time we have to stand up for our values.
Christian Brakel, now President Erdogan and the supporters of this referendum say that this is good for Turkey because it's going to streamline decision making. Do you agree with that? What is the purpose of this referendum in your view?
I totally don't agree with that. I think if you look at the details of the referendum, something that very few Turks, at least according to polls, have done, like more than the half of the population does not even know the details they are voting for. When you look at it, it's pretty clear that this referendum, if it is successful, will basically abolish all separation of powers in Turkey, will bundle an extreme amount of power in the hands of the president with very limited possibilities for the opposition, for the parliament, even from within its own party, to have a say in these decisions. So I think that's definitely not helpful. So I would think if the referendum is successful, we're going to see more of what we've seen in the last half year, some sort of like prolonging the state of emergency indefinitely. It might not be called state of emergency anymore, but the effects will basically be the same. I have one thing to say to my counterpart in Ankara, who said like this whole debate that we now see in Germany has a lot to do with the upcoming elections. I agree. I mean, Mr. Erdogan makes a very easy target, but this is not only for right-wing populist movements, which we have in Germany and with whom we have like a growing danger towards the German democracy as well, but there is a cross-party consensus that people are feeling, politicians, but also people in Germany are feeling very uneasy, even from the left, with what's going on in Germany, because things that happen that happen in Turkey, because things that happen here have direct repercussions on the streets in Germany, be it the conflict between the Turkish security forces and the PKK, be it the conflict between the government and the Gülen organization, or right, be it the abolishment of human rights and democracy. You bring up a number of points there. So this is something that people are very about.
Let's put some of that then to Metin Atmaca in Ankara, particularly the point that Christian was making there, that this referendum is bad news for democracy in Turkey. What do you say to that?
I mean, I would partially agree, but on the other hand, I see a clever movement in terms of from the Erdogan's part. So far, Turkey has been, governed by several coalitional parties and governments, and so far, I mean, I like to see a good part, a good side of it as well. As I see, he's basically trying to bring it down to two-party system, as like conservatives and Democrats, or conservatives and the left-leaning social democrats. So Turkey's political spectrum is kind of reshaping in these days in terms of these two sides. So even in the short term, the conservative may win, but in the long run, I think that this will create two sides of parties, and probably in the future, in a couple of years or so, the next government will be more social democrat leaning.
But what do you say?
It is not the end of the democracy.
What do you say to this argument that the referendum is going to give more powers to the president, and that is something that is dangerous for democracy in Turkey? What do you say to that? You agree with that?
Well, I don't agree. I don't agree because, as I said, I mean, Turkey has been going through several of the coup d'etats and such moments of the undemocratic periods has been already experienced. It's in the mind of the people, and Turkey is not made of one single minded people. It's made of several different nationalities and ethnic groups and religious groups. Even if for a short moment we have a period of the undemocratic period, as I said, I think in the end people will again stand against and will reshape it. So I don't think the government is unaware of such a moment. So probably yes, at the moment they are trying every way they can win the referendum, so long as they can establish a strong government, a stronger one that will not go back to 1990s with coalition governments. But as I said, I mean, the future I don't think will hold of an undemocratic system here.
Raphael Bossong, there's been some criticism of Angela Merkel in the way she has reacted to this. A number of leaders in Germany and in Europe have said that she hasn't been tough enough on Erdogan, not only after this, but in previous incidents, like, for example, the arrest of this German journalist in Turkey last month. What do you say to that?
Well, it's a combination of her personality, which is certainly less, say, polemical or taking a strong public stance on these issues, and her official role as the head of state, or not the head of state, but head of government, in the sense that obviously she has to balance a lot of different interests. And I think much earlier in the program was said that, yeah, okay, in Germany we have also election campaigning, but in this case Merkel can only lose because on the one hand, well, she could also now speak up against Erdogan, but on the other hand, she knows perfectly well there are so many other reasons and functional needs to cooperate with Turkey, and she has to balance this in a very careful manner. And only accentuating the rhetoric in a way might only play into the hands of sort of actors in Turkey who want to see this conflict and therefore tell Turks in Germany and Turks in Europe, look, you know, you're not welcome here, vote for us, you have a strong backer home. So I think it's a very fine balancing act. She has expressed her condemnation of this arrest. It's a matter of style whether you think that's enough. What is more, I think, significant is, in general, sort of finding a sort of framework and a common agreement among all political parties up until which point there is a possibility to cooperate and when there really is the red line. And I think the referendum is certainly a red line, after which, if it's going in the way Erdogan wants, Germany will have to take more formal actions than just writing letters. But my last point on the case of the journalist, I think the case of the journalist, Yücel, has rightly kind of attracted a lot of critical attention, and the Justice Minister has written a critical letter. However, with all the kind of criticisms that the German government has made and will continue to make, he is also a Turkish national. So from a purely legal perspective, there is not the right or the privilege of Germany to kind of intervene as protecting as a German national. Under the dual nationality law, he is also a Turkish national and thereby can be treated as a Turkish national by the Turkish state. One has to recognize that.
Christian Brackel, has Germany's Chancellor handled this the right way? Does she need to tread this fine balancing act, or does she need to be tougher on Turkey?
I think the government or the Chancellor's course to trying to not fire this crisis up more, but like to keep it on a relative low level is the right way to do it. Because basically, I mean, in a fight with a populist, you can't win with populism. You can only win by ignoring the whole thing as good as or as much as possible, and trying to conduct quiet diplomacy behind the scenes. I think this is the right way to handle it. Let me just say something on the discussion that we had before with my counterpart in Ankara, saying like, we had a lot of unstable coalition governments in Turkey. I mean, this is true. This is something that the president is campaigning on. But the general issue that I and many others in Turkey take with this referendum is not a presidential system as such. You can have a presidential and fairly democratic system. I mean, even though you can argue that if you look to the US, it's not serving everyone well. But it's possible. The problems are in the details. The details of this referendum really foresee a system without any checks and balances. There will be no independent judiciary.
I want to put that point briefly to.
This is not democracy.
I want to put that point briefly to Metin Atmaca. The concerns that are being expressed here, particularly given the fact as well that there are currently at least 80 journalists who are imprisoned in Turkey right now.
I mean, I agree with my counterpart in Istanbul. I mean, there are definitely undemocratic, I would say undemocratic results of the period and the process. But again, I mean, I will have to compare with the previous, before 2010. I mean, we had, for the last 80 years, we had a more military dominant system, and for the first time
we're going to have
the military is not dominating into the politics.
We're going to have
and for the first time we are going to go for a further point, and we will see the end, and then we will decide if it's undemocratic or not democratic.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you to all three of you, Metin Atmaca, Raphael Bossong and Christian Brackel. Thanks very much for being on Inside Story. And thank you for watching as well. Remember, you can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Hazem, Sika, and the whole team here, bye for now.